When Office first came out, it was obviously intended for end users, and a lot of people say, well, it wasn't very technical, or it wasn't capable of being very technical either. And of course, what I like over the last few years is that it really has risen to the occasion. Along with that, so have the types of things that we're trying to do from the desktop, so it all makes sense as part of the evolution. But where people get confused about audio and video is, if they haven't used it, there's all these different file types and these technical specifications, and what do we need to know? The most important thing for working with audio and video in PowerPoint is just knowing what types of files will work, because all of them don't. Of course, there are a lot that are kind of third party, if you will, or not mainstream. I don't want you to memorize all of these file extensions, but if you look at the audio list, there's two that should kind of stand out for most of us. Certainly a lot of these others are being used in different places, but MP3 files, most people have heard of, on your MP3 players. WAV files have been around for forever, and of course recently Windows Media Audio, WMA files, are popular. The important thing to remember is that a WAV file always works, but they're also extremely large files, and that can be a problem if you're trying to use this over a web server or an internet page, or even burn it onto some kind of media that doesn't have a lot of file size. On the video side, again, you have options, but not quite as many. The AVI audio format or the MPEG video format are really kind of standards in the industry, and you'll be fine with those, and Windows typically has them. If you've worked with some different type of file, you may have to go through a conversion process in order to be able to use it directly in PowerPoint. The easiest thing to add to a PowerPoint presentation is a sound clip that you can get from the clip organizer, just like you get clip art. Of course, there's a lot of them out there. You can use other kinds of files, but let's start with that one. Since we want to insert it onto our slide, of course, we're going to use the Insert tab on the ribbon. And then since it's a sound, we're going to come all the way over and use the Multimedia or Media Clips section. Click the down arrow, and we will choose that we want to do a Sound from the Clip Organizer. This is going to launch the pane that allows us to search, like I said, just like clip art would. Now, what I'm thinking for this chart is that when it's playing, and whether it's playing with a live presenter or more appropriately, if it's playing on its own at a kiosk or via a web deployment, then we might want to have some kind of sound effect to draw attention to the fact that the last series here shows great improvement on how people are affected by visual communication. So I would like to do something that kind of draws attention to that with a little sound, and maybe I'll do a search for something that has to do with applause. All I have to do at this point is click Go, and it's going to go out to the internet, and it's going to search. If you don't have an internet connection, it will search on your local hard drive, and I can come down and see what they have. Now, most of these are pretty self-descriptive. We have claps and cheers. We have a crowd cheer. We have different versions of crowds. So as you see, you can get really lost in just looking for multimedia. It is important to choose the right sound. You don't want to just pick something that's kind of close enough. It really should fit your message, just like you want your artwork to fit your message as well. When you find the one that you want, you'll go ahead and click on that. I did want to show you one feature here that's kind of interesting about these clip galleries. If you look at the lower left corner of the first clip, it's just an empty corner, as opposed to the one to the right of it, which has the little globe on it. The globe means that this particular clip is coming from the internet, from Office Online. That really doesn't matter as far as we're concerned in some situations, but you might want to go ahead and download that to your hard drive to make sure that you always have a copy. Sometimes when you find just the right piece of art or sound, it's hard to find it again because Office Online has so much content. All right, back to inserting our file. We also can see from the icon that it is a WAV file. I'm just going to give it a click. And a couple of things happened. It inserted it onto my slide, and it also brings up this little dialog box. Dialog box is saying when you're playing a slideshow and this slide appears, do you want to play the sound automatically, or do you want to click it and force it to play it when you're ready for it? A lot of times when we're doing this kind of audio, we want it to play automatically, and the easiest thing to do is just click that button. You'll notice now that the little speaker icon is there because the file itself has to be held in something. Everything on a PowerPoint slide has to have a container, and so the speaker represents that audio file. In theory, that's all you have to do. Choose a sound file, insert it, tell it to play automatically, and you're good to go. But we do have this little speaker sitting right in the middle of the slide, which may not be the best thing. So for now, I'm just going to drag that up to the top corner of my slide. There are, of course, are also options that we can work with. And if you look at the ribbon, you will see that we have now a Context Sound Tools tab, and we can look at all different kinds of things that we can use to work with this file. It is not an audio editing program, but you do have a few things that you can do to kind of play with how the sound behaves in PowerPoint. The first thing that you might want to do, of course, is preview the sound. The second thing you might need to do is work with slideshow volume. And when you click on this option, you can set it to low, medium, high, or you can actually mute the volume. Generally, you want to leave it at medium unless there's a reason to change it some other way. You also have an entire section here called Sound Options. One of the things you can choose to do is to hide it during the show. Another thing is to loop it continuously until you physically tell it to stop. Now that sounds like a good idea to some people. It's like, oh, I got this applause sound and I want people to be excited throughout my presentation, so I'm just going to play that. Well, if it's a very short clip, like this one is, just a few seconds, that gets to be really annoying. It sounds like a good idea, but about the third or fifth or 20th time that people hear it, they really don't like it anymore, and they'll probably stop watching it, especially if it's something running at a kiosk where it's going to go on and on and on. So be very carefully about looping sounds until stopped. Here's where we can also set the option to play it automatically. Now, we did that with the initial dialog box, which was certainly easy. But if you made the wrong choice or you want to change your mind, you can come up to this drop-down and choose to play it automatically when clicked or to play across slides. What you have to understand is that what we did when we said play automatically is actually create an animation. When this slide appears, this sound is being animated and saying, okay, go ahead and start as soon as the slide appears. When you have animations, those are limited to a single slide. So as soon as the slide changes to the next one, the sound will stop. If you're playing something like background music through a wedding video or you want to do a slideshow with a photo album, then you probably want to have a CD track or something play from slide 1 maybe to slide 20. That's when you would choose this option. We'll go ahead and just leave it as automatically because it's a very short sound and we do only want it to play on this slide. The other setting that's a little confusing is one that says max sound file size, and by default it's set to 100 kilobytes. What that is saying is that any small file, like this sound clip, is going to be kept embedded in the PowerPoint file. Most people are just kind of indifferent to that, okay? If that's what they want to do, fine, but what are the options is the second question. If it's a large file, you probably do not want to embed it in the PowerPoint file because then the PowerPoint file itself becomes too huge. Instead, it would then be linked. Why that's important is that if you take this presentation to another computer and I just copy the PowerPoint file, the linked audio file would not be available. And I think a lot of people have seen when disasters happen. Somebody shows up, they've practiced, they've rehearsed, but they go to a remote computer, they go to play their multimedia file, and all of a sudden it just comes up and it says file not available. So you can modify this setting, but it's really more important to know why it's there and what it stands for. If you want to see if your sound is actually embedded or linked, you can click on the dialog launcher at the bottom corner of Sound Options. This box shows us the same options that are on the ribbon, but down at the bottom it tells you not only the total playing time, in this case it's 5 seconds, but it also says that the file is contained in the presentation, so it's embedded. If it was a linked file, it would actually give me the path name so I would know where to find the sound file. I'll go ahead and cancel out of that. And let's see, what I might do, and this is just a habit of mine that really isn't necessary anymore because we do have the hide during show option, but I'm in the habit of actually moving this icon behind something else. Now I have a picture in the upper right corner, so I've just drug it onto that picture, and now I'm going to use my arrange command and send it to the back. So it's still there, we can still see the selection handle, but it's now hiding. That way I don't accidentally have it show up because the little speaker isn't something we usually want to see visually as part of the presentation, even though we want the multimedia content. Another thing that can help is sometimes, depending on the capabilities of your computer, you might see a little flash when it starts before it hides. This prevents that because it's already hidden behind something else. So let's take a quick look at this slide. Go down to my slideshow. So those are the basics of getting a sound file into your presentation, but I want to show you that there are a couple of other options that are really fun and they kind of make it possible to do better, more elaborate things. So we'll go back to Insert, and we'll move back over to the right, and we'll look at our Insert Sound dropdown. We, of course, used Sound from Clip Organizer. The very first option is Sound from File, and that would be any file that you already have on your computer, and it could be something that you recorded off of a CD, something that you used a microphone to record, any of those types of things. Remember, it needs to be a supported sound file format. One of the fun things to do, though, is to come on down and look at some of these other options, like play a CD audio track. If you have some favorite music, or people who are doing their graduation slideshows, things like that, can use CD music by simply putting the CD into the computer. The benefit is that it doesn't change the size of the file at all, but of course you have to be aware, and it makes sense, that that music then is not integrated at all into the file other than saying, go to the CD player for this computer and play it. If you go ahead and click on this option, you'll see that the options include which track you want to start and stop at, as well as the time within that track. So you can be very specific to get a certain verse or a certain phrase that you're looking for. You do have loop until stopped, generally not necessary with CDs, but it's there, and the sound volume, and also hide, just like we had before. So we'll cancel out of that. Go back up, and our last option here is to actually record a new sound. You have to have a sound card, which you do for all of these audio features, and you also have to have a microphone. Microphones aren't that expensive these days to get fairly good quality. I'm going to go ahead and drag this up into the middle of the screen so you can see a little bit better. You should give your sound a name. Just like any file that you create, it needs to be something that makes sense, and it will tell you what the sound length is as soon as you start recording. You simply have the ability to play, to stop, and to record. So you click on the record button, say what you have to say, and then stop. It's really a nice feature if you have something that you want to have as a voiceover, if you will. I'll go ahead and do cancel and talk about kind of a bigger, better option, though, for voiceovers. It's actually called the full narration capabilities of PowerPoint. If I was doing a self-running slideshow, either at a kiosk, to present at the web, or maybe to email a potential client, I might want to have my voice as a presenter, even though I'm really not going to be there. That's known as narration. If I go up to the Slideshow tab on the ribbon, right in the middle there's an option that says Record Narration. Now when you click here, you get a lot more options than we had for just recording a sound. Recording a sound should be simple. Narration is more complex. It doesn't have to run the entire length of the slideshow, but it could have, 3 or 4 files maybe. But it certainly is going to be longer than a simple sound. You need to choose how you want to record, and that's probably the most important part. Now I can see right here, based on my free disk space on my hard drive, it's saying that I can record for 32,610 minutes. Even I don't think I can talk that long, so I have plenty of room to record the narration for this particular presentation. Please make sure that you do, otherwise it gets frustrating when you're right in the middle of a good narration sequence and the message comes up, you're out of disk space and has to stop. You can set your microphone levels, and you'll definitely want to do that to ensure that everything is working at the correct volume. And then you probably want to take a look at change quality. Now this can get very technical, so I don't want to go into all of those details, but just show you that you can create your own profile, or from the drop-down under Name, you can just choose the type of quality you're going for. If you're trying to do a professional marketing piece, you're going to burn it onto a CD, then choose CD quality. At the bottom, if you want to get into just knowing a little bit more about what's going on, there's a drop-down for attributes. And I can see how the frequency and the rate and all of that is being recorded. The main things we're worried about here is that this particular setting does record in stereo, and it's 172 kilobytes per second. That's going to give me an idea about how much space I need. When you get those set, you say OK. Brings you back to the dialog box, and then you can go ahead and say OK, which will start running through your slideshow and give you the ability to pause the recording and to even restart in the middle of the presentation. It's really a very powerful feature that you can then lay over the top, or a voiceover for PowerPoint. Well, that's about the options for audio. A lot more than it used to be, certainly a lot of things you can do, but on the other end it's also very simple if you just want to add a few little interesting sound bites. But what about video? Video has always been kind of the nemesis of a lot of people because they think it has to be hard, and it certainly could be. You need to make sure that you have the right quality, the resources on your computer and all of those things to make sure that it's going to play correctly. As an example, there are some things that PowerPoint can't do. You can't take DVD video straight from a DVD and use it in PowerPoint. Now, there are some third-party programs that will let you do that, but directly from a DVD to PowerPoint is not possible. That's video DVD. If you have created and burned your own files onto DVD, that might be different, but you have to look at the file type. Some file types, like Macromedia Director and some Flash movies, can't be played directly either. You do have an ActiveX component, but that's beyond what we want to talk about here. One of the popular formats, which is Apple QuickTime, can't be played in PowerPoint. If you're going to try to use that, you need to have some way convert it into an AVI file. With all of those disclaimers and explanations out of the way, how about if we go ahead and actually insert a video? Now, of course, what I want to do first is I want to start by coming up to my Home tab and inserting a new slide and changing the layout to just a blank slide. Doesn't need to have anything on it. Then I'm going to move to the Insert tab, back over to the right, and instead of inserting a sound, we're going to insert a movie. Only two options for movies, and that is to either do something from the clip organizer, which is generally not going to be what people think of as a movie. It's more just a short animation. Great for HR, draw a little attention, but not a full-blown movie. Instead, I'm going to do Movie from File. When I click on that, it opens my dialog box, and I can see that I have a VizCom movie that has been created. I'm going to go ahead and double-click. It inserts it into the background, and just like it did with the sound, asks me if I want to play it automatically, and I will go ahead and say yes. Now, just so you know, this particular movie is nothing fancy. It was actually done with Windows Movie Maker, which comes with Windows Vista and some of the prior versions. So you don't have to have high-end video creation software to do this. It is very similar from this point on to what a sound was. We have a Movie Tools tab. We can preview it, we can work with the volume, we can also play the movie automatically and hide during the show. Now, why would you want to hide during show? I'm not sure. I don't know that I would ever use that feature because it's video, obviously. We want to be able to see it. What I would choose to use is play full screen. Now, I'm not going to do it for this particular demonstration, but normally what is a good thing to do is to say play full screen and then resize it and actually drag it off of the slide. People say, well, why on earth would I drag it off the slide? Because when you play it full screen, as it plays, all of the rest of the interface and the slide are going to go away anyway. But if you leave it on the slide, there may be a very brief flash where you see it in that smaller size on the screen before it goes to full size. By dragging it off, that won't happen. So there's just a little tip to make it a little bit smoother and a little bit more professional. You can loop the movie until you stop it, which if you're doing a trade show kiosk or a demonstration that people need to look at over and over again, may be okay, but like a sound, probably not. And you might want to rewind the movie after playing. If I have something playing at a kiosk and I want people to come and just click a button and say play that again, then rewinding it is going to make that easier. I'm going to move over to the size group and click on that to bring up the dialog box. When you look at this in the middle, there are some check boxes that say lock the aspect ratio, make the size relative to the original picture size, and there's also one that says size it to the best scale for the slideshow. Without getting into all of the intricacies of screen resolution and projectors and things like that, checking this box will always optimize it so it's the optimum size, and that can change for different presentations, different areas, different computers. So click best scale for slideshow. Say close. Notice that it did resize. We said play full screen, so it's not that we care too much about that right now. You could then, of course, choose to preview that, or you could come down to the slideshow view and click. If you want to have a polished, professional, even an adequate presentation anymore, you almost always have to have some type of audio and video. Now, it could be simple. It could just be a little soundbite here or there. But whether you're doing something for a family event or something for a professional marketing piece, you need to know how to use those pieces and put them together. Of course, that means that you need to start with something of good quality. And I can't help you there. That's not what PowerPoint does. But once you have a file, you can tweak them a little bit, work with some modifications, and certainly get them to play the way that you want so that it adds impact to your presentation.